Zero Endz. Welcome to another stream here on Zero Endz podcast slash live stream. I'm Zero Endz here. I think today's stream will conclude chapter 2. And some sent out the word. And one of the few things, as you know, as we go deeper into this lengthy PDF that was written by a Black woman in regards to viewing herself and this thing we call the myth of the strong Black woman or the mental illness. Is it really mental illness at the end of the day? Saying a strong Black independent. So far, throughout the first chapter and concluding tonight, the second chapter, it's proof evident that you're not as strong as you like to call yourself. And, you know, this is all for educational purpose. I know some people will in the future go back to this, re-listen to playbacks like this, right? They like it or not. It's educational. It's something that will be helpful for the development and growth of not only women that are going to be adults or even go as far as being future mothers. All information is helpful at the end of the day. I'm not gonna share that. And I think that as you have a more open mind, understanding the information, this will be helpful. Okay. And let me see if I got a picture image I could share so y'all don't really see dead space air. Let me think. Let me find it. Give me 1 second. Okay. So maybe I'm scrolling down. All right. Okay, I think that's pretty much everything from what I'm seeing in here. Yeah. All right, so let me close some windows down. Close this one. Okay. Let me find the article. Let me find the the book or the PDF. Let me stop sharing this. I'm trying to find it now before we begin. Mm. Mm. All right, let's see if this will work. There we go. So let us begin. All right, let's see if my finger's still working. Yeah, good. Let's find it. Today, we'll probably conclude this chapter. And where we left off, we're gonna left off where we stopped at. What was the last part we stopped at? We stopped at mental health and depression. Now we are continuing on with emotional overeating. And before I start, let me turn this off. Okay, let us begin. Emotional overeating. The subject of overeating behaviors appear in a substantiation amount of the literature discussed by the experience of the strong black woman. This is from by LaFontaine, 2009. LaFontaine, 2005, in the States, that the construction of strength as central to the strong black woman has not actually confronts power or strength to black women, but instead produce a body problem. Most commonly typified by the black woman compulsive overeating by LaFontaine. I'm not gonna have this. All right. Okay, where was I? Okay. LaFontaine report on a study of depression and overeating in a population of black women that she interviews 12 black women between the ages of 19 and 46 years of age. So from 1946, that's roughly 26 to 27-year difference, with a mean age of 27.4, which I was right, who were enrolled at a large urban university in the southern USA. The women representing a range of body types and weight, and 5 of the women self-identified as overweight or obese. Four of these women, as well as four of the non-obese subjects, identified issues of overweight or obesity among many of the other women in their immediate family, mothers, sisters, grandmothers, etc. Most of the women described their understanding of their roles to becoming strong Black women as emanating from the behavior of the women they saw immediately after or around them, women who rarely cried, who prized fortitude in the face of challenges, and who urge their female children to tough it out and be strong in their coping skills and in their dealing with others. Stop right here. So not only that this was a learned behavior that was set aside by the women in the community, particularly Black women. Now, can we go into depths where they get it from? We could investigate this more, but at the end of the day, this is something that was roughly more pushed during, I would say, after integration in the mid 60s. Because if you look at before the 60s came, we never heard about strong independent or any of that nature. All this started to come to play after Black people were assimilated into the American social order. Not in the way how we see assimilation today, but they are now assimilated where you had to participate more into this nation, or what they call the illusion of inclusion. But let's continue. LaFontaine calls this the performance of strength, page 105. And this phrase captures the insidious aspects of the message underlying the strong Black woman myth, and she suggests, rather than realizing actual strength by utilizing mechanisms that ensure strong Black women are taking care of themselves emotionally, psychologically, physiology, and pantomime of strength, soloism, and assertiveness is emphasized, and this shows becomes the feature of strength that is most meaningful despite the negative consequence it may have in entrenching depression, self-doubt, frustration, and isolation. As the woman in Belafonte 2005 describes their experience growing up as Black women, they almost universally express that the role of the strong woman was prejudiced, or I should say projective, on them by others. As the research notes, none of the women describes coming to that identity on their own. Rather, they describe various instances in which their strengths was called out by others, or overall message they internalize that reinforce their responsibilities to care for themselves and others, echoing the observation note above by Romero, 2000, that cry as a behavior outside the bonds of traditional strong Black woman expressions. One, Bell Bull LaFontaine subjects reports that an unexpected bout of crying during a particular trying times in her life prompt her girlfriend to offer going to the hospital as an immediate solution because the subject's nerve never cried and her girlfriend was frightened by her emotional release and figured she must have been terribly ill to engage in crying. Let me read that again because that didn't really stick well with me. It says here, reports that an unexpected bout of crying during a particular trying times in her life prompted her girlfriend to offer going to the hospital as an immediate solution because the subject never, and it means in quotes, never cried, and her girlfriend was frightened by her emotional release and figured she must have been terribly ill to engage in crying. Mm. When you're in a direction when you're trying to condition women, particularly black women, that you should suck up and take pain, take sorrow, take even loss, and never show emotion. This also applies to the men in the community as well. But this is not dealing with the men, we're dealing with the women in regards to this study. The same rules apply. You must be strong, tough it out, don't cry. It's all in a form of not dealing with the problems that they suffer within themselves. Just want y'all to know that. The other woman in the study similarly relates rarely, if ever, seeing their closest female relative, and certainly not black women outside of their immediate circle, cries as release from stress or anxiety or frustration. It simply was not acceptable behavior. The overweight women in Belle Lafante in 2005, studies described the act of eating as an escape and exit. And that's page 115. So if you notice, when we notice a lot of black women that's very overweight, and they're right, roughly, I'm not sure what the percent is, I think it's greater than 6%, could be wrong. That is one factor why they are overweight, because they're trying to escape or find some forms of exit out of their lives, out of dealing with reality. This is why you see a lot of men tell the real harsh truth of black women today. And the reason why they don't handle it or they have a problem with what they're saying, because they're trying to find coping mechanisms, things to escape. They don't want to take no form of real accountability. And it's natural because you have been bred and groomed that you should not. So now what has happened, your health suffers from this. You eat yourself out of a gym. You will eat yourself pretty much out of existence if you're not careful, because you don't want to deal with the harsh realities of your life and how your life is going. Let's continue. From having to carry out the performance of strength that was overwhelming them and making them doubt themselves and their abilities. These women use phrases that capture the reality of compulsive eating. They describe engaging in eating thoughtfulness and not really tasting the food. One of LaFontane's subjects described the revelations that regular exercise brought into her life, ordered by the doctor to commit to regular walking in order to manage her high blood pressure, and efforts to avoid full-blown diabetes. This subject describes how walking liberates her to think freely, to think differently, to begin to change the way she begins about her role in the world. She begins taking care of herself and describing how her sense of her own strength shifts from performance on it for others to recognition that she was vulnerably and deservingly to focus attention on healing herself. And when she did so, she felt herself becoming both physically and emotionally stronger in the most authentic sense. One of the other women in the LaFontaine 2005 study describes how her overeating behavior were an extension of her anger and despair and being used by the white professionals in the school she works at to exercise her authority as a large black woman. I call it the mammy. Let me highlight that. And see, when they talk about racism, white supremacy, it is a real phenomenon. And not only the black man suffers the most because men are always you is always a form of warfare. You take the man, you get access to children and women, but also women, the sisters get also caught up in this warfare as well. Where the warfare she gets caught up is she is a devoted servant to non-black people, even to the point where she will not only make her body go to waste, but everything else in the offices of control, full submission, full control. It's like living in a totalitarian system, if you think about it. Or difficult students, but did not value her authority beyond that function. She felt ignorant and that her contribution were not valid. An incident of overeating in the school that she relates Pio Grantley suggests how with each bite she was stifling rage at her perceived visibility or invisibility. Another woman identifies the overeating behavior of her overweight female family member, suggests that the private, sometimes secret acts of eating constitute the only moment when these strong black women give attention to themselves, found a movement of quiet. You eat and you relax. One report, page 118. This subject, who reports having numerous obese female family members, identified that they were depressed and said they couldn't possibly let themselves go in the degree they had used unless they were ill. LaFontaine provides a challenge to this subject. Interpretation of the overeating behaviors states that it may be an act of trying to hold onto one's self. And that's page 119. This interpretation is somewhat consistent with another possibility, and that is that overeating is an act of resistance, a way to voice frustration about being overloaded with responsibility and expectations associated with the strong black woman role. And I'll pause here for a second. Isn't it ironic that they said, I do this because I'm taking an act of rebellion? But how are you taking an act of rebellion when you're killing yourself quietly with consuming a whole lot of calories? The only way you're going to really do some real rebellion is when you resist and fight back systems. Overeating is not fighting back systems. As much as LaFontaine states in his research on this, I had to look at another way. Now, mind you, a lot of women that work today is a choice. And living in the West, we call America, it does require two incomes. So more than half, or greatly 70% of women in America are going to work. Now, how you work and manage work and eventually find a mate and sustain a family, that's solely up to you, ladies. But it can be done. But you have to sacrifice something to make that happen. Let's continue. Where was I? It is LaFontaine 2005 thesis that overeating as a strong black woman is not about an intention to let themselves go. Instead, she frames it as an intention to hold onto oneself by attempting to grapple with the challenges attending on the performance of strength, rather than to actually find and holding of healthy and supportive strengths. The research drew a connection line from such eating disorders as anorexia, nervousness, and bulimia, or what we call bulimia, which she states has been linked empirically to afford to resist loss of self, to the overeating behaviors in response to emotional needs that were described by many of her subjects for themselves or for their family, or actually from their family members. Binge eating might be viewing as a form of self, what they call nutrition or neurotracens. One of the few culturally acceptable and sanctioned options available to Black women by Toffman and Poe in 2010. This fact copes with previous notes, body images, difference notes for blacks and whites, and particularly between Black women and white women, suggest that the typical results of binge eating, sufficient weight gain, does not carry the same degree of positive effects in Black culture as it does in white culture. Indeed, as noted early in the chapter, Black women generally reports greater body satisfaction as a higher weight than do white women. By Burks, Hellman, 2008, Hickerson, 2010, Mewing, 2008, etc. An examination of the prevalence of binge eating in a population of Black trauma survivors was performed by Harrington in 2010. They surveyed 179 Black women recruiting from a variety of environmental and representing a range of social economic backgrounds. Each woman reports that she was a trauma survivor, someone who had witnessed family violence before the age of 16, been the victim of rape or sexual harassment, suffering emotional abuse or neglect, suffering physical abuse or an attack, had experienced a serious accident or had an accident relating injury. The research demonstrates a wide range of instruments, including several trauma measures, the binge eating scale, the eating disorder diagnostic scale, emotional inhibitions, and self-silence assessment, and two subscales. The Mammy and the Superwoman, which is look like two different versions of two different women, possibly, of the stereotypical role for the Black woman scale in order to assess for relationships between trauma, binge eating behaviors, and strong Black women belief. They then perform 6 separate exploratories factors analyzing to arrive at a primary construct. Based on the relationship yielded by the factor analysis, the research found a significant relationship between trauma exposure and the level of strong Black woman ideology internalization. The relationship in turn predicts the likelihood of binge eating as a mechanism of emotional regulation. Troutman and Pohl, 2010, called the Harrington study an excellent example of the rare quantitative study incorporating a culturally specific African American construct in a trauma focused framework. And that's page 492. Harrington, 2010, note that whereas previous research had indicated the relationship of overeating and emotional regulation, these studies provide the first empirical evidence for the applicable of the effects regulation model of binge eating to the experience of Black women trauma survivor. The difference and the research observed was that among the Black women's greater internalization of the strong Black woman image was correlating with both greater incidence degrees of trauma and with overeating behaviors. They speculate that the strong Black woman profile might provide a form of socially acceptable cover to Black women struggling to cope with various emotional and psychological challenges with whom feel unable to express their distrust emotional for. Fear of what it called counteracting or disapproval or counteracting or disproving their strength and thereby losing their identity as strong black women. Thus, overeating that temporarily mitigates the effects of feeling helplessness or vulnerability was a way to assert control and as LaFontaine in 2005 argues, a way to hold on to self, the self of strong black women. You hear about a strong black women, nonsense in this conversation, but it still applies. Harrington in 2010 suggests that the effects of the strong black woman image and its relationship to overeating behaviors and thus overall health status of black women might be considered a variant on the John Harrisonians. They state that with both an extreme internalization of an original positive cultural symbol can have detrimental effects if striving for an unbalanced or unrealistic ideals is expected. Harrington at 2010, page 476. The strong black woman message is intended to foster resiliencies and perseverance in the face of significant obstacles, many of them associated with the dual oppression of gender and race. Given the degree to which strong black women in Congress has taken hold in the black American community, one must acknowledge that the image has probably been a useful construct for black women in various points over time. However, it would seem that the image of the strong black woman is not useful when it comes to black women's health. Interesting. The most obvious example of this may be in the behavior of emotional overeating as a way to silence the depressive feeling that a strong black woman must prevent herself from giving voice to it, and she is to remain strong. This behavior copes with the black cultural resistance, such as John Harrison's and to pursuing healthy support or medically interventions appear to lead black women who ascribes, at least in part, to strong black woman ideology, sustainability, or susceptible to a host of negative consequences relating to both their reflective resistance to prioritize their own self-care and the negative psychosocial and what they call physical logical effects attention or attentive on obesity and depression, hypertension, diabetes, cancer, stroke, what they call coronavirus disease or cardiovascular disease. We're almost done. The iconic of the strong black woman may have served her purpose in enabling black women to maintain and succeed in a dominant white culture that over the centuries has often been neutrally and unengaging with her struggles at best and hostile at worst. But it may be that the strong black woman has overstayed her welcome as a workable concept and that black women are in need of a new model and ideal of black women as capable and strong, but also worthy of attention and care of nurturing, who can serve herself and others best by respecting and honoring her own needs without sacrificing them to the idea of serving someone else's needs. And this is a small diagram, which I can't show right now, where it shows from strong Black woman persona, there's two arrows linking to emotional eating and depressive symptoms. This is a conceptual framework. This is figure 1. Based on the review of the lecture and a hypothesis that relationship exists among strong Black women persona, emotional eating, and depressive symptoms, and the purpose of this study is to elevate those relationships. Now, the conclusion of this, chapter 2. The disproportionately high rates of obesity and overweight in the Black female population is a source of great concerns for the implications of healthcare costs, accessibility of service, and mobility and mortality rates for Black women by Baltrus, 2005, and Keynes, 2008, and Weeds, 2005. There is also a moral and ethical dimension to the issues as Black women battle a sense of dual oppression in American society, and the high rates of obesity may be further marginalized them from benefiting realized by others in society. And it's by same sources from back in 2000, early to late 2000s. Many of the studies discussed in this chapter draws a connection between Black female overweight and obesity and high rates of depression and anxiety. And that's by LaFontaine, 2008, and Mirurter, 2003, and Miranda, 2005, and others. These two are a source of concern, for they suggest that Black women are undoubtedly affected by the struggles to cope with mental illness that often goes unreported and untreated. And I'm going to say something after the end of this chapter. The literature reviews indicate that the Black women are especially suspect to the message that they must sacrifice their own needs to support and care for others in their family and community. Okay. And that's by LaFontaine, Hickerson, Clark, and Peacock. Those all came around 2000s. This message appears to be a key face of strong Black woman imagery, a construct that has been employed by individual Black women to assert a sense of strength and control over their surroundings, while it is often employed by others, the Black community at large, and reflecting to some degree in stereotypical expectations of some whites, to place the Black woman in a positive, to be a caretaker, mother, nurse, mammy, maid, by Core, 2009, LaFontaine, 2008, Harrington, 2010, Romero, 2000, Wines, 2008. In this role, the strong Black woman is long-suffering, uncomplaining, and strong. The compelling evidence of so much of the research discussed in the chapter suggests that the strong Black woman is just barely remaining upright, carrying the world on her shoulders, by Atlas, like by LaFontaine, 2005. The rate of physical, emotional, and psychological morbidity and disproportionately high for Black women, and it seems logical to assume that the need to push onward with the strong Black woman ideology is perhaps contributing to make Black women ill. And that's by Maziru, 2008, Murray, 2003, and Yin, 2006. As Murray in 2003, he states, and others have observed health behaviors do not arise from a total void. It is necessary to consider the ways in which cultural reinforcement messages are shaping Black women's health belief and self-care practice. LaFontaine, 2008, Black Peacock, 2011, Roman, 2000, Ward, 2009. This study focused particularly on the issues of obesity and looked at how overeating a clear contribution to overweight and obesity by Burks, Hellman, 2008, Franco, 2005, and others. That same, decade. May be an example of a strong Black woman coping strategy that is maladjusted and not well serving the woman trying to live up to the image And that is it for chapter 2. And my notes on this. Let me exit. To saying this. One of the few things, is it is a couple mechanisms when you have to eat, overcompensate, dealing with the harsh realities of the world. And I'm saying this is somewhat of a man's world. And since society makes you have to work and be like men, there is consequence for that, either voluntary or involuntary. Now, I said it earlier today in the stream that it's going to take 2 forms of income to survive in this Western world. But if you're a woman, Black woman, you don't have to do this alone. You can find a mate, get married, to take some load off this. It will not stop it because, like any person living and being productive, you have to overcome your problems and face the world as is, accept it as is. Now, in regards to the illness side of things, I'll say this, that a lot of Black people, especially women, and we could say the men, but it's only focused on women, we don't like to go and seek actual therapy. I know many content creators been pushing for the last couple months now, and we could say a year now, and I've made a conscious effort to, been listening to a lot of these streams, and there are resources out here where you could now find actual therapists to find out your actual problems, why you do what you do, why you have anxiety, why you have sorrow, why you can't cope, why you can't function in life. The resource is here. But the most important question you should ask yourself as a woman, Black woman particularly, what are you going to do to really fix that problem you have? Because from what is revealed in this chapter, it lays out why this is a problem. The strong Black woman nonsense that a lot of women still keep pushing and don't understand the repercussions. Why I think last, why I had to keep calling myself of any group. I'm strong, I'm Black, and I'm independent. No woman can function inside, keep not only depicting that, but is engaged in it as well. Therapy is one of many steps you must take to start to deal with your problems and deal it consciously. And what I find with a lot of people in this community is not proactive. They remain stagnant. They love to be stagnant. And at the end of the day, it does become a problem. Like I said, either you're going to deal with your problems personally and take actual action, or you're going to continue to suffer with what you're getting, and you're going to remain get the same results. And like anything, this is what we call insanity at the end of the day. And no person wants to remain insane. So be proactive. Be about doing the necessary, not only physical work with your body, maintain your health and stuff, but to really get and see a proper therapist, clean bill of health, so you can control your bad habits. And I think overeating to cope with the stresses of the world is not the way to go. Because African American people are dying at an alarm rate, not only by influx interaction with physical violence that leads to death, but also the inner violence what we do to our bodies. And this is one of the many things. So that will be it for this chapter. The next chapter we will go into is chapter 3. I'm not sure what the chapter holds, but you'll know. Be notified by hitting that bell button. If you're not subscribed to Zero Endz channel, subscribe to it. And also leave a comment during every I guess podcast, live stream, you want to call this. And that's it. Thank you again for listening. Until next time, take care.